everybody. Welcome to episode 28 of the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia, and I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. This week I'll be reviewing 6 new LitRPG books from Amazon. We have Luck Stat Strategy, Secret of the Old Ones, Book 1. We have Lion's Quest, Undefeated. Then, You're in Game, LitRPG stories from best-selling authors. We also have Growing Pains, The Proving Grounds. Then, Sucked Into an RPG, a LitRPG novel. And finally, Realm of the Nine Circles. We'll begin our show, though, of course, with our LitRPG news. In LitRPG news, we begin with the LitRPG Facebook group has reached 3,000 followers, and the LitRPG Society, another Facebook group, has reached over 1,000 followers. To celebrate these milestones, both groups are having a giveaway contest. A number of LitRPG authors, including me, have donated copies of their ebooks, physical books, audiobooks, and tons of more prizes to be given away for people who are entering these. For the full details, the contests are slightly different timescales, including deadlines, rules, all that good stuff. Visit their Facebook pages. Again, that's the LitRPG group and the LitRPG Society group. We also have links in the show notes for those groups for you to go visit and check out if you want to get some free swag. Okay, also in LitRPG news, J.A. Hunter has released the cover art for the second book in his Viridian Gate Online series. It's quite pretty. The Crimson Alliance, that's the name of his second book. He's also mentioned that he's shooting for a release date of around February the 17th. So, if you're looking for the second book in that series, yay. And lastly, in LitRPG news, William D. Orand is putting out his Other Life trilogy as an omnibus collection, and it's up for pre-order now with the release date of February the 2nd for $9.99. Some nice, interesting new cover art. I believe he's actually using the same artist that I'm using for my book stuff. So, yay, it's very pretty. Okay, now on to upcoming LitRPG, the nice review list where we're letting you know what's coming up as is listed on Amazon. On January the 31st, we have Spawn Campers, the second book in the Crucible Shard series. We have the re-release of Nagant Wars, the Pawns Dama, also on January the 31st. We have Dungeon Madness coming out sometime in February. We have the beginning of Vasily Mahenko's new LitRPG series, The Dark Paladin, Book 1, coming out February the 7th. Viridian Gate Online, again, Crimson Alliance, February 17th. Then we have Spitznats, a permadeath LitRPG Lit FPS series. The author renamed the title a little bit, I think, to appeal to American audiences, to make it a little more clear what it's about. It is out February the 28th. Then we have, that's it for February. So again, anything beyond this month and next month, it'll be in the list on the show notes if you want to check it out. But that's it for this and next month. On to new releases and reviews. Okay, new releases and reviews. We have 6 reviews to go through, and some of them are rather thorough, so we're going to get right into it. Begin with Luck Stat Strategy, Secret of the Old Ones, Book 1, written by Blaise Corvin. Now, Blaise Corvin is the author of the best-selling novel Delvers LLC series, a nice favorite of mine, and he's released this new LitRPG series. The author describes it as hard LitRPG, set in a steampunk Victorian era, H.P. Lovecraft type of world. Now, it is 153 pages, although it should be around 225 according to the author. Amazon has some weird page counting issues sometimes. It is $2.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. And from what I understand, this is a choice from the author, and that he has a very strong online following, and he doesn't want to exclude them from reading the story in any place that he wants to put his story. So there you go. I'm going to read the description from the author for you. Secret of the Old Ones is a deep dive VR game, the likes of which the world has never seen. Trent Nogueiro, a hardcore gamer, has been playing for a year and is about to get his big break. He is about to catapult himself into the ranks of the most powerful players in the world. However, power comes at a price, and celebrity creates enemies. Trent has the keys to massive success, but he also accidentally painted a target on his back, both in and out of the game. Okay. Now, for the most part, the author's description of the world being steampunk Victorian H.P. Lovecraft type horror world is pretty accurate. The Lovecraft influences is mostly seen in some of the cool game mechanics where magic has an additional cost of possibly making the user go insane if they fail a sanity check, and monsters attack that same kind of sanity. It's an interesting, unique mechanic, and I really liked that the characters have to be careful about how they use magic and when because of that additional cost. I personally just liked reading the story. Good characters, good action and adventure, really focuses on those aspects of it. The game world that it is set in is a unique Victoria era setting with plenty of steampunk influences. There are player versus player and player versus environment battles. The character classes are unique and theme appropriate, like Artificer, Alchemist, those kind of things. There's epic endgame loot, rare items, and an interesting storyline about what happens to a player that gets hold of stuff when it's worth a great deal of real life money. Now, my only real complaint about the story is that I wanted more. The author has stated that this story is sort of a side project for him, and it's really helped him increase his writing pace for his main series, Delvers LLC. He's always intended this story to be more of a novella, and reading the story, I can see some places where he likely edited out several thousand words and instead chose to summarize what was happening before. This is a really cool world, and personally, I just wish I would have got more of it, more lore, more skill builds, more information and backstory about the game world and about the characters. That's the kind of stuff that I like to read as well, but I understand that that's just not the formatting that the author was going for in this particular book, so I get that. The story is very easily an 8 out of 10 for me, a big recommend. Okay, on to Lion's Quest, Undefeated, written by Michael Scott Earl. This is 697 pages, $7.49, also not available on Kindle Unlimited for very similar reasons to what the last book was. Author is a really big online following. He wants to put it wherever he wants to without exclusivity rights to just Amazon. Okay, now full disclosure, the author sent me an advance copy of the novel for review, but I've since purchased it since it came out. Okay. Author Michael Scott Earl has written several successful series, including the Destroyer and Concrete Chaos series. Now he's written his first LitRPG story, Lion's Quest, Undefeated. Now this is my description of the story. Leo the Lion is a competitive VR gamer who's at the peak of physical and mental skill and has been the undisputed champion of Stellar Unlimited for the last 10 years. After his latest championship bout, he is approached by a beautiful woman and introduced to the next generation of immersive gaming, Arnescript. There, he'll experience gaming so real, it's indistinguishable from real life, and meet fantasy creatures that he can form real connections with. Unfortunately, someone doesn't want the champ to retire from professional gaming and will do whatever it takes to stop him from switching games. Ooh. Okay. I really like this story. And I can see a lot of great potential in the series. The characters have depth, the fights are wonderfully descriptive, and I genuinely wanted to read more about the world of Anacrypt when the novel was finished. I just wanted more of that new immersive game world. There are a few quibbles I have with the story, of course, but overall, I really enjoyed my time reading the story. The beginning chapters of the story are almost an exploration of virtual reality technology. It's a comparison between two different kinds of game worlds. The first one, which is Astar Unlimited, uses technology which is just a slight leap into our current future of virtual reality technology. They're using VR goggles, omnidirectional treadmills, haptic feedback based on vibrational motors, and that is compared to the new game and the new immersion system. Anacrypt uses a type of next-gen full immersion system that most virtual reality enthusiasts in our time really would have wet dreams about. The two different game worlds are both interesting, but again, they're also comparisons of what we basically have now and extended slightly in the future and that next gen dream kind of virtual reality experience. The first one, again, Astar Unlimited, is an extension of the popularization of competitive gaming. And again, the other one, the more immersive Anacrypt, is a more of an exploration of a detailed simulated world full of realistic artificial intelligence. And if all the novel did was to describe the advancements and show that comparison and explore that as speculative fiction, I would still think it's a really good story. But it does more. Combat in both games are really fun to read about. You can actually tell that the author has experience with player versus player, realm versus realm, kind of competitive combat with the first game, the Astarar Unlimited. And it's very descriptive of basically modern gaming. You have hotkeys, pre-selected classes, levels, abilities, player versus player combat, tournament stuff. It's really cool. But in Anacrypt, the full immersion one, combat is more realistic and gaming aspects are more slowly introduced into that particular world. These are just fun game worlds. Both of them. I actually liked reading about both of them. I did feel like there was more detail in the combat oriented tournament stuff. Just because I think the author has more experience in that than in the not yet realized full immersion game world. But that's totally cool. Two things that I could have thought of could have done better: less time in the world and more world building. The format of the story is set up this way. The beginning first 15% is game stuff. The next 35% of the novel, real life stuff. And the last 50% of the game is basically just more game stuff. I have to say that while the real life stuff created some real emotional connections to characters and, gets you a little sniffly, doing some emotional parts, it just kind of went on for a little too long for my personal taste. But again, that's me. That's not a knock on the author. And I understand that's a story choice. Just personal preference. Now, the only thing I would have liked to see more of, in that second immersive virtual world, Anacrypt, is world building. Even though you spend quite a bit of time there, I don't really know much about the game world. There's a reference to like a single event, and that's kind of it. The description of the world is less detailed than the other game. You're introduced to a couple of races, a few locations in the world. I just would have loved to get more stories about each race's culture, some historical understanding of the world, and, information about what's possible within that game world, magic systems, combat skill trees, whatever the case is. A lot of that's a little lighter, on that second game world. It is immersive. It feels more like Portal fantasy world where that you'd set up. But again, it is full LitRPG. There are heads-up displays eventually, character stats, damage notifications, all that good stuff. This is a good story, and I look forward to the next book in the series. It gets a good 8 out of 10 for me, and a big recommendation. Okay. Next, we have Your In-Game LitRPG stories from best-selling authors. This is 162 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And now remember, this is the short story collection from Magic Jump Books, the folks who translate a lot of the Russian fiction into English and publish it here in the United States and in other languages. Now you should be aware that right off the bat there are a lot of ads for other novels published by Magic Jump Books at the beginning and also at the end of the book. And again, just full disclosure, Magic Jump Books gave me an advance copy of the book for review. And again, I purchased it when it became available. So there you go. There are 7 stories from 4 well-known Russian lit RPG authors and 2 newcomers. As with any short story collection, it's kind of hard to review as a whole because there are always going to be stories you like and stories that you just don't. So I'll review them individually. The first story in this short story collection is Shamanic Rites by Vasily Mahenko from Way of the Shaman series. Now to summarize, remember when Mahan got his totem in that book when he was becoming a shaman? After the first book, I believe it's book 2, maybe 1, I can't remember. But the first shaman trial. Well, another character is basically doing this in the short story. Fleita. To get her totem. There's lots of her worship of Mahan, but besides the totem she gets, there aren't any big surprises because you've already kind of read the story and it's nothing really new. So it didn't really grab me. It wasn't a big recommendation for this particular short story. The second story in the series is Purgatory by Andrei Levandi from the Phantom Server series. Now this is actually set before the Phantom Server series, so it might be more along their prequel novel, The Crystal Crystal something, I can't remember. It's a short story about a character testing the neural implants used to jack into the game, where he can create items from his memory through an act of will, and he also has to face some of his troubled past, because again, it's the things in the game are created from his mind, so he might have some troubled things in his mind that are popping out in this world. It's a really cool story. I liked it. Next is Throne World by Michael Antomonov from the Perimeter Defense series. This is an account of some of the events from the Perimeter Defense story, told from the point of view of Lekana, the daughter of the main character, Crown's Prince Georg. While there is some original story here, a lot of it reads as a review or a clip episode from a television show. So you're going to get a lot of different points of views on stories and events that you're already familiar with, and it didn't really work for me. The Best Quest by Andrei Novak, the Altera series. Now, this is a new LitRPG series, apparently. Since this is from a new LitRPG series, everything is new, which I liked. The short story actually feels like the first chapter of the book, and kind of maybe a way that the publisher's testing the market for this kind of story. It's set in a future where the real world is a wasteland. Altera is a game set up by the elites that even, now this is verbatim from the story, that even ghetto inhabitants are allowed to play and earn credits that can be turned into real world money. That's from the story. I'm hoping that it's just a description of the stratified society that develops within this new world. But we'll move a little away from that. In the short story, Jack the Drifter tries to make a living in Altera, and it's a new LitRPG, so I was really into it. So there you go. Next, in this short story collection, Countdown by Pavel Kornev. This is a standalone LitRPG story not connected to any series. This is, again, the second author that's new. The story is set in a fantasy, full immersion virtual reality game world. The main character is sent as a gun for hire or troubleshooter to find a player killer who gruesomely murders his victims, making sure they feel every bit of pain before they die. And again, as an original LitRPG story, I enjoyed it. Next is The Date by Marina and Alexei Osachuk, the Mirror World series. Now, these events take place in book 2 of the Mirror World series, told from another character's perspective, although it's done, I think, a bit better. Remember the guys that hire Olger to pick up the rare resources for them because they want to increase their reputation, but need a high-level resource gatherer? Well, it's that story, plus the real-life date of 2 of those characters as they go on their date, Count and Irene. It's super cute. I liked it. Next is the story of A Raid by Vasily Mahenko from his Galacticon series. Now, if you've been waiting for more from the Galacticon series, this is probably the closest you're going to get until Vasily Mahenko finishes his Dark Pollen series. Sorry. The story of the ship Alexandria and the player Marina as they go on a raid in the game. It's a standalone story set in the Galacticon world, and it was kind of fun to dip my toes into the world again, although I had to kind of look at the original novel to remember all the things that were happening, characters' names, things like that, because it's been a while. But I enjoyed it. Okay, so I liked 5 out of the 7 stories in the collection. You may like fewer or more of these short stories, depending on how you feel about the larger series, but I kind of review them individually, and that's how I feel. Okay, next is Growing Pains, The Proving Grounds, by Wade Adrian. It is 267 pages, $3.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, every time Wade Adrian puts on out a new book in the Proving Grounds series, I'm really surprised by how much I like it and how much I think every time I read it, oh, this is better than the last one. The author's storytelling skills seem to get better with every series in every novel in the series, at least from a LitRPG standpoint, for me anyways. I'd kind of consider this a standalone novel. It doesn't directly relate to the previous books. There's a new main character, although the events in this book are influenced from the fallout of those other 2. But it's not like, although all the same characters show up, there are some good cameos though. The story is about Pete. He's been in a coma for the last 2 years, and he's using an experimental neural interface that has allowed his mind to wake up and exist in the game. His doctor hopes this stimulation will help his will help him wake up. But as far as the story goes, it's just kind of a new way to explain trapped in the game. The first chapter sets up a potentially fascinating journey as Peter proves they can not only exist in the game world, but actually feel pain and a full sensory experience, something none of the other players can. Now, unfortunately, these race stakes for Peter are kind of a wasted story opportunity in the first 30% of the book, since he's kind of guided through the character creation process and escorted through the game by game developers, and then power leveled later on by higher level characters. There's just got, to me, a missed opportunity to describe this character who's uniquely able to feel pain and to feel the pain of existing in this world, how it compares to the player experience of other game players, other characters. Like I said, it's not detraction from the story. I just think it's a wasted opportunity that could have been explored. There's a lot of interesting epic storylines. And while they're interesting, I like them less. There's a big story arc where some of the fallout from the other books are impacting the story. I won't spoil it for anybody, but it's more of an epic overall thing, and it ends well. It's a satisfying conclusion to that particular arc, but to me, it was less interesting than when the character just had an opportunity to learn on his own, explore the game world, fight, kind of explore what his class could do, and even do some crafting. I like those parts of the story more as personal preference. So there you go. It's a good story, though. I enjoyed it. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. So it's a good recommendation for me. Okay, on to Sucked Into an RPG, a LitRPG novel, Sucked Into an RPG Book 1, written by D.J. Stone. Okay, 251 pages, $3.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, author D.J. Stone is the pseudonym for two sisters who have written almost 30 books on Amazon, including a teen superhero series and a long romance series. The author's first foray into LitRPG, however, is less than spectacular, and it honestly feels like an attempt on cashing in on a new trendy genre. Whether that's the intent of the author or not, that's just my personal feeling of what it felt like. Okay, while the story is set in a game world, there's no character progression according to the game rules. The characters get exactly one level up in the entire book, and it's really weird to read that he's suddenly level 12 when there's no level given before and no description of XP ever really given for completing any of the quests. Also, leveling up doesn't seem to have any impact on the character's power. The extent of the game mechanics being shown are the character's inventory, quest dialogues, and a few game notifications. For the first 30% of the novel, the non-player characters in the story are absolutely boring. They're flat. The basic premise of the story is that a character, Jamie, is literally sucked into his video game, and he thinks that it's a virtual reality mode that he's stuck in. He learns later that it's different, but that's the premise of the story. And he's the only person, as far as he knows, in the beginning of the novel, that's trapped there. And so the only people he can talk to are the non-player characters. And because they, at least in the first 30% of the novel, they're just dumb bots. They can't deviate from the scripts that they get. And so the character basically talks to himself for the first third of the book. And it's not pleasant. Then suddenly at that point, the non-player characters become more self-aware without any real explanation as to why. I can only guess that the authors felt bored writing dialogue that was stilted from the non-player characters, and so they decided to change things up, which is just for the better. The dialogue got better after that. But the main character does not, there's also a second person in the description of the novel that's described as he meets another girl who's trapped in there for months. But it doesn't happen till like almost midway through the book, about 40%. And at that point, it kind of turns into this teen romance, novel thing set in this game world, which makes sense. It's kind of the wheelhouse that the authors are usually writing in, which is a romance and teen romance kind of stuff, where it makes sense that it would kind of have tendency to write that kind of story, but it just doesn't work for me. And to me, the biggest sin of the story is that the game world is just boring. I didn't have a good time reading about it. The quests that the players go on felt unimportant. Like there were just things for them to do. There was no, it just wasn't interesting. So I can't recommend it. I'd give it a 3 out of 10. So not a recommend for me. Okay. On to Realm of the Nine Circles. Last review. It's a long section today. A LitRPG book. Okay, it is 309 pages, $4.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. This story is written by Amy Hopkins, author of the urban fantasy series Talented, and P. Joseph Churburino, who's written a number of sci-fi stories. This is also their first LitRPG novel. Now, this is going to be my description of the story, which is slightly different from the Amazon description. In the real world, Gideon Thistleweed is the genius creator of the MMO Realm of the Nine Circles and a super rich CEO of the company that runs it. In the game, however, he plays Milos, the Monster Lord, a terrifying, bull-headed, tentacled, magic-fleeing creature that most players think of as a high-level NPC boss. When his employees create technology for the world's first immersion rig, Gideon starts to change the game to make the non-player characters artificially intelligent. He does a bunch of weird stuff too. When his employees discover the secret behind the amazing leap in AI, they oppose him both in the real world and in the game with a little insider help. And, of course, using that new immersion technology. Okay. I'm going to begin my review by saying that I like the novel. It's really nice. It's well written. The story is interesting. It's a mix of fantasy and speculative fiction about what a madman would be willing to do to push the boundaries of AI technology in his game world. The characters feel fleshed out. I cared about them immediately. They were very distinct and interesting. The fantasy world of Realm of the Nine Circles is well described. I could picture one of the first scenes is set in a blood forest, and I got appropriately creeped out, and I felt the deadly intent of the murderous trees in that world, in that particular setting. So very well described. There are some good action scenes later on. The technology behind and the science behind the game immersion stuff is really believable and well written. It seems like the authors did their research, and you can tell that the authors have lots of experience writing fantasy and sci-fi. However, when it comes to describing the game mechanics of the Realm of the Nine Circles, there's a lot left to be desired. I had a brief exchange with one of the authors, and it seemed like they basically just made the decision to very, very, very gradually introduce LitRPG elements into their story so that they wouldn't alienate their existing fan bases who would read the story. Remember, both of these authors have existing storylines and stuff they've written, and they don't want to, alienate their existing readers by, even though this is kind of a test for them in a new genre market. Unfortunately, this also makes it less likely that the LitRPG fanatics or LitRPG enthusiasts are going to give this novel a full read. We get some nice glimpses into the game world early on in the story, but most of the first 30-40% of it are set in the real world, not in the game world. At that 40% point, the characters jump into the game world full time, and most of it exists in that game world. And there are more battle notifications, scenes, things like damage percentages lost, healing percentages, spell damage percentages, etc. All that standard stuff. It's just that many LitRPG readers aren't going to stick around in that story for that time because they're not getting the stuff that they came for, which is LitRPG stuff. So that's going to be kind of a detraction. If as a reader you're willing to stick it out, there's more game stuff later on in the story. However, even when it gets more game-centric, the game mechanics that are mentioned are not explained, and the terms that are used, they become very superficial. And that's just because, as a reader, I personally never got any kind of context to understand them. Even after I finished the entire book, I don't understand how the game world works. I don't understand, is this a class-based game? Is it skill trees? How do the character stats like strength and intelligence work and relate to like what they do? How does the magic system work in the novel, in the game? None of that is explained at all. They just kind of assume that these are the terms you kind of have to use, and they're not like inaccurately used at all. It's just that there's no context given and no explanations as to what they mean in the game world. So it just feels like they're throwing out terms. And I don't think that's their intent to like try to fool anybody. It's just that they didn't do a very good job of setting up the game world in the first part of the story. So when they start using a ton of game terms later on, even though they're used correctly, they don't mean anything because they're never explained. And that's kind of my overall description of the game world. I'll give you an example. There's an armor class system in the game. And in some places in the storyline, it's just described as 100%, as in, I'm assuming that refers to the durability of the armor. Like it's 100%, it's good to go, no damage there, but there's no actual numbers associated with it. So I don't understand if it's good armor or bad armor. But in other places in the story, a similar piece of armor is given a number like 315 as an armor rating. But again, I don't have any context for that number, so I don't know if it's good or bad, or if it's just trash armor. Because again, none of that stuff was ever explained in the story. And there's a lot of that in the story. Skill trees, players level in the game, but they don't mean anything. Because the authors never explain what they mean. I don't know if leveling increases health, mana, endurance, or if they get stat points that they need to distribute, or skill points that they can invest in magic systems or in particular character, skills or whatever. It's just something that they write about and they don't explain. So it doesn't mean anything to me. I can't feel that sense of progression that I want in a LitRPG because there's no explanation as to how that progression occurs, which is kind of frustrating as a LitRPG. As if I was just reading video game fiction or a regular fiction, I wouldn't care. It's not what I'm expecting. But as a LitRPG reader, I expect to get this information so that I understand the game world. When I was reading this thing, I put together like a super long list of all these things that were bothering me, and it got pretty long, and I decided not to read it on the podcast because it would take me another 10 minutes. So I'm hoping you get the idea of the things I was frustrated because it's a really good story. I just wished that these game mechanics were explained so that I could love the game world as much as I did like the overall story. So as a video game fiction or a sci-fi novel, it's good. It would get a 7 out of 10 for me. But as a LitRPG, I'm sorry, it's just not satisfying. And I would give it a 5 out of 10. So there you go. That's it for the week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. It's kind of a long episode because that short story collection, I reviewed them individually. But it is what it is. Remember, folks, if you enjoyed the podcast and you want to support us, you can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But the thing I'm actually asking folks who are interested in supporting the podcast and me in particular, if you have read my novel that I've written, Adventures on Terra, and you liked it, go leave a review on Amazon. I've actually noticed that in the United States, I have plenty of good reviews and reviews in general. So awesome. People have a chance to find it in the United States, but in other countries like the UK, Australia, Germany, where they have their own Amazon domains, EU, UK, whatever, those reviews don't exist quite as much. So if you live in those countries and you like the novel, please leave a review. It's going to help other people find the novel, and it's going to help support, of course, me, podcast, all the great stuff. So that's it. Thank you very much for hanging out with me today, folks. Until we can hang out again and read and talk about these great things that I personally love, and I hope you love as a LitRPG reader. Remember, go read some LitRPG.